Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for another inspiring It's the Bread story. My guest today is Leanne Ramsey. In August of 2023, I spoke at a women's event at Calvary Chapel, Chattanooga, where, as my guest today puts it, milling your whole grain and making bread has taken her friend circle by storm. But Leanne only jumped on this freshly milled bread making train this past July, but she already has a story to tell. Leanne, welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. Thank you so much for reaching out to share your story with me. So why don't you begin by telling us just a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Sure. So thank you for letting me be a part of your podcast. I've been binging it ever since I kind of got on the milling your own grain train.
Yes.
It's just great to hear your voice. My name is Leanne Ramsey. I'm 38. I've been married 10 years. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this past June. We've had our first child in 2023, a little boy. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. We've lived here about 7 years, but I'm a Midwest girl at heart. I was born and raised in a small little town in Missouri.
Oh, man, that is amazing. So what brought you to Chattanooga?
So my parents actually moved here. So they were in Missouri. We were all there in Missouri, and they ended up moving here because my brother had gone to a Christian college outside of Chattanooga and had settled down, and they were having, the grandbabies, and my mom and dad wanted to be closer to him. And then my sister followed. And my husband and I were in Missouri kind of seeing them have all this fun here in the mountains, river, and everything. And so we kind of followed a few years later.
Oh, that's amazing. It's a beautiful place right there.
It is.
And I love the way you say it. I say Chattanooga because I'm Southern. So I say every syllable and you say Chattanooga. Yeah, I love it. But you shared with me that you actually learned to make bread from your grandmother as a young girl. What a wonderful experience that must have been. Tell us about that and why you moved away from making bread.
Yes. So I was homeschooled. All the way up through high school. My sister and I both were, and I have an older brother, but he went to public high school. And of us three kids, I'm the middle child. I had a lot of energy. And my mom would make me kind of take breaks from my homeschooling and have me run laps around the house to the mailbox, just trying to get some of my energy out. She had me in all the sports growing up. But because of my energy, my mom would send me off to my grandma's a lot to get a break, I think. And so I was at her house a lot, and she was just a master in the kitchen. Like everybody knew her knew that she was just such a great baker of pies, of cinnamon rolls, of bread. Like she just was so good in the kitchen. And so when I was over there, she would just kind of bring me alongside her, and we ended up making all those baked goods, and I have such a sweet tooth. And so we would make the bread and the yeast rolls, and we'd knead it by hand. And she taught me every step and was so patient with me. And it was just a good, practical way for me to get some energy out. I wasn't going to, back talk my grandma or, try to get out of it. And so I was a good student, and I loved it. I really did. I loved learning how to make all the good things that she could produce out of her kitchen.
That's amazing. Now, did your grandmother mill her flour, or were you making it with her?
No,
mostly?
She didn't mill her own flour.
Okay.
She just kind of got what she could from the store. And just kind of learned it. I think she used like a recipe from a 4-H cookbook. I remember the pictures of this.
Oh, I love
cookbooks.
it. Yeah. I learned to bake some bread and things from Girl Scouts. We actually did a cooking class at I grew up in Savannah, like Savannah Electric and Power Company or something like that. And I love that little cookbook. So that's amazing. But but you mentioned that you had some health issues and one that led to a borderline celiac diagnosis. So in your words, no more bread. So is that when you moved away from bread?
Yes. So yeah, I can kind of back up.
Yeah, back up.
There's some layers to this, but so I grew up, the late 80s, early 90s, was most of my youth. And so, my go-to was a bowl of cereal. My mom wasn't the big cook in my family. My dad did a lot of the cooking. And so we had a lot of cereal, a lot of macaroni, and then, of course we had a big sweet tooth and we'd get like Hostess cupcakes, so just really good nutrition there.
No sarcasm at all there.
Yeah, right. And so I think my only saving grace was I love the sun. I was always outside, barefoot, exercising. I've always been a huge, water drinker. That's my favorite drink of choice was water. And so I think that was my only saving grace. But I think my health issues and kind of the major theme of my whole health journey, I started to develop some skin issues in high school, real bad acne on my face. And then in my early 20s, still kind of had acne on my face, on my shoulders. And so I got on antibiotics to try to get rid of that. And I had kind of a reaction to the antibiotics. And then in 2012, I'd heard that, that getting on the birth control pill would be really effective to kind of help clear your skin. And so I did. I didn't know if there'd be any side effects, didn't even question that. I think, they say until you're 25, there's a part of your brain that isn't fully developed about, considering consequences. And so and some of my friends had been on it and, had glowing skin. And that was a big motivator for me. So I got on birth control pill in 2012. I was probably 22, 23 years old for my skin. But what ended up happening, it took care of, quote unquote, took care of my acne on my skin. But I developed almost immediately melasma, which is a pretty severe skin pigmentation across like my cheeks, upper lip, forehead. And also some of the side effects of the birth control pill was mood swings. I was getting UTIs and yeast infections pretty frequently, headaches, joint pain. And, and so it was kind of like I exchanged the one issue of, acne for a host of others. Yeah. And, there's that verse, I think in Romans, where it says they exchanged the truth for a lie. And that's kind of how it felt, I exchanged one problem for so many others. And so, unfortunately, I stayed on the pill for about 5 years because I ended up getting married during that time. And so I thought, well, hey, now I can use it as a form of contraception too, and it's helping my skin. And so I tried, during that 5 years that I was on the pill to really kind of just treat the symptoms. I went to a dermatologist about my melasma because it was pretty embarrassing to have such severe skin pigmentation, especially, across my upper lip. It looked like a mustache. And so that's not very attractive.
Right. For a girl. And pretty self-conscious about that as a 20-something-year-old girl. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I was just kind of trying to treat the symptoms. And really, that's when I kind of learned to really dig into the root of the issues. And fortunately for me, my husband is a big researcher and he is always asking the why and just sits down and, we have a spare room in our house that is just full of books and commentaries. And, he just loves to research. And so during kind of the first couple of years of our marriage, we got very serious about our diet and started eliminating, seed oils and processed food and going grass fed for our meat and, just kind of like looking at it, the ingredients And I mean, we would go grocery shopping and both of us, and it would just take us hours.
And buy very little of what
Yes,
you used
because
to buy.
we were, reading all the ingredients, and we're like, no, we don't want high fructose corn syrup. And no, we don't want, and so it just was taking forever until we kind of found our rhythm. But I just remember just being at, the grocery store forever and just thinking that, I'd been in there 40 days, 40 nights by the time we got out of there. But yeah, so we started to take our health really seriously during that time. And that's when I made the decision, that I needed to get off the pill. I was, having all these, other side effects from it. And it was kind of like, hey, I'm not going to get better until I get off the pill. And so it's kind of a step of faith because we were also kind of, not really ready to start a family yet. But I mean, it was to the point where I was, kind of miserable with all the side effects, the joint pain, the constant headaches, the yeast infections, everything I'd mentioned before. And so, also kind of what I was noticing in those 5 years that we really got serious was that we were, sick much less than I'd ever been in my life. And that was amazing. And that was very motivating to kind of go a whole year and not have any sniffles or sickness at all. And so the big thing was like, okay, let's get off the pill. And so finally in 2007 is when I got off the birth control pill. And I had done enough research to know kind of what to expect when I got off of it. And, but I think there was kind of like a detox period with the pill because it didn't really hit me for like 5 or 6 months after I'd gotten off of it. And then, now there's a coined phrase of post-birth control syndrome. And I experienced that to the max, and so some of those symptoms are sugar cravings, really intense sugar cravings, anxiety, depression, bloating, fatigue, where you have no motivation. I went from having a very regular, consistent, 5-7 day period to just 2 days, which is very abnormal and unhealthy, in some cases. And then I had some weight gain. And I've never struggled with my weight. I've always been very active and athletic. And so then to all of a sudden have this weight gain where I couldn't shed it, no matter how much exercise I could do, was really frustrating. Water retention is part of it. So that was kind of, my experience from the pill. Not only that, upon like researching just kind of post-birth control syndrome, come to find out that there are other side effects of where the pill depletes your body of basically everything.
Oh, yes. Yes. And people don't realize that.
No, the doctors certainly didn't cover this with me, and, it can cause liver issues, lots of inflammation in your body. It can totally deplete you of your B vitamins. And so I started taking so many supplements, Sue. Like I had a handful of supplements like that I would take just to try to get my body back to where
it needed to be. Yeah.
Yes. And so it was so frustrating because I was having all of these other symptoms and I just felt like I was shooting arrows in the dark trying to heal, trying to recover from the 5 years that I was on the pill. And so from 2017 to 2020, it was just a roller coaster emotionally because of the anxiety, the no motivation, which, I'm a very high energy person.
Yeah.
And so to experience just an extreme level of fatigue and no motivation really in my life was very scary for me because it was so like against who I was. Out of character. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get better. Taking all the supplements that, I was just constantly researching ways to like heal my liver and get my energy up. And, and we were doing the real food and the exercising. And we are at this point kind of starting conversations about starting a family, but I knew that I didn't want to take that step while I felt so off. I knew something was off. And so finally, when our world shut down in 2020, that was also when I decided to go to, I call her my gut doctor, but she's a local chiropractor, and she was able to order me a stool sample. And so I did a stool sample, and it showed that I had leaky gut, lots of inflammation in my body, and that I needed to, and that, I was right on the cusp of having celiac. And so I needed to eliminate the high inflammatory foods like eggs, dairy, and gluten. And so that was pretty devastating to get that news. I kind of knew that it was probably leaky gut just from the research that I had done and the issues that I was having. And so for, the first part of 2020, which, it was kind of convenient that there wasn't a lot going on in the world and I didn't have much work during that time. I kind of did the keto diet where I just upped my fats and protein. I was drinking bone broth for every meal. It got to the point where, even now when I think of bone broth, I'm like, oh gosh,
not another cup, please. Yeah.
Yeah. And then during that time, I incorporated fasting. I did a 5-day water fast just to kind of reset, my system, and, just really watched what I ate, tried to really cut out anything that was inflammatory. And so after, a couple months of living like this, eating like this, I started to feel better and more like myself after not feeling like myself for about a decade.
Yeah.
And so I was really seeing improvements, and I slowly started to reintroduce foods, but really at that point limited gluten. We just never had bread in the home anymore. And I didn't like, the gluten-free options. And there weren't actually that many as there are now. I had to really, drive around town to try to find, those options. And I didn't like them. After you've tasted like homemade bread,
you're this isn't bread.
It isn't. It didn't taste good. And so, we just never had bread in the home, because even if we'd go out to a restaurant and I'd have a roll, I usually would feel it afterwards. I'd get a headache or feel kind of just tired. And so we just limited it. And I was like, okay, this is just a part of my life now. I just can't have bread. But because I was kind of the bread maker in our family and even in my extended family, I'd still kind of make yeast rolls and cinnamon rolls for the holidays, because that was kind of tradition that I would do that.
Yeah.
And so, and even buying the good flour, that premium on the shelf at the grocery store flour, it's still I'd still have kind of adverse effects from it. And so so that kind of brings us to last year, 2023, we had our first child, and I had a home birth, and I recovered really well from it, except, I just wasn't keeping up with the nutritional demands of, breastfeeding. Also during that time, I developed dermatitis, and that's why I wasn't able to hear you speak. I was on maternity leave.
Oh man.
Yeah. And
that's a good reason to miss it.
Yes. And so I wasn't able to hear you speak. I was home with a new baby, learning how to be a mom for the first time, and just kind of struggling to, just really keep up, because it takes a lot out of you. You're not sleeping. But so many of my friends had come to hear you speak. And then, months after, were buying mills and telling me about this, fresh milled grains. But I hadn't even tried some of the breads that they were making. I was just hearing about it. And so, so I hadn't really jumped on the train, as it were, yet, just because, I was a first time mom. I was so overwhelmed. And so I just didn't feel like I had the margin to, try milling my own grain. It just seemed like a lot.
Right.
at that
Right.
point. And then we ended up moving just to a different location here within the city. And then we were having car issues. And so it was just kind of like one thing after another that just kind of like limited my margin there. But fast forward to February of this year, and my brother has since moved away to the West. My sister is overseas as a missionary, and so we're all going to be together as a family and do a family reunion. And so I actually had worked at Calvary Chapel before I got pregnant. I was in the office. I worked in the office with the accountants. And one of our accountants, Dawn, I told her I'd give her a shout out.
Yes, Dawn.
Yeah, Dawn. Hey, Dawn. She's the best. She has milled her own grain for over 10 years. And when we were getting ready to go to our family reunion down in Florida, she sent us with some homemade fresh milled grain bread. And so we had stopped halfway on our trip to Florida at an Airbnb, and we were hungry. We hadn't really packed anything. And she had given this bread to my sister for us to try. And my sister is like, hey, I have this bread from Dawn that we could have while we're, trying to figure out meal plans. And so we opened that bread. I will remember it for the rest of my life because we opened that bread. We had butter. We put butter on it, and it changed my life. Like, it blew my mind how good this bread was. And it was like an emotional experience.
Oh gosh, you're like, bread again.
Yes.
And that was in February of 2024.
Yes, it was.
And you had been gluten-free up until that point, or no bread, no grains.
Yes.
And you tried it.
Yes,
oh my
and
goodness.
I tried it, and I could have cried. It was just so good. And I'd never tasted bread that good before. And I'd say that truthfully. It was the best bread I'd ever had. And so I immediately texted her, and I said, Dawn, teach me your ways. Like, this is the best bread. And so we got back from our family reunion vacation, and we set up a time where she had me over, and we just had a bread day. She showed me how to mill the grain. I mean, I was there all afternoon, the rising process, everything. She showed me step by step, and I was hooked. And so then in July, I ordered myself a mill, which was an investment. And that was kind of something that, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in. I'm kind of an all or nothing person anyway.
Yep. That's what I say about myself. I tell people I'm an all or nothing. I'm all in.
Yes. Yeah. And so I ordered the mill, and I jumped right in because after tasting that bread, and then, she had been doing it for 10 years. And so that was a high standard. And I was determined to get to meet that standard.
Yep. Yeah.
And because of my past of just, doing bread with my grandma, it was just like, I think I had told you, it was just like returning to an old friend.
Yes.
It almost made me emotional, just like, because it's a legacy. And so just getting my hands in the dough and kneading it, and just kind of remembering, that those times that I had with my grandma in her kitchen, now I've returned to it, but in a better, improved way.
Yes, the new and improved.
Yes. And so, I was making waffles. We were having waffles for dinner, pancakes on the weekends. My son, he would kind of reach up and poke the dough as I was kneading it, and, saying bread, he's hooked. My husband is thrilled to have bread back in the house. And so that's kind of like what has brought me back to the bread.
So you got back into the bread, and I'm just thinking, I don't know, people come in my house and they're like, your house smells like cinnamon rolls or something. And I'm just thinking, your house smells like home again.
Yes.
So you brought the bread in, but you actually got a little discouraged at first, as you didn't seem to be experiencing the health benefits that all the others were talking about, or so you thought. So tell us about that.
Okay. So I enthusiastically jumped all in, was making bread. We were eating some sort of fresh milled something at every meal. And I was listening to your podcast, hearing the testimonies, and, I was feeling really good and the bread was good and I was excited and we were, just kind of loving our experience, having, our fresh bread again. But probably about 2 or 3 weeks into this process, when I was last year, let me back up. Last year when I had our baby, I also kind of developed dermatitis, which is kind of like a severe form of eczema around my nose and mouth, and it's real red, inflamed, kind of scaly skin. And so, so I'd been kind of dealing with that for the past year, and so here I am making the bread, and all of a sudden, 3 weeks into this, that it was kind of like my skin got worse and there was like pimple like bumps that developed on my chin. And then for a couple nights, I had the most severe joint pain in my hips, in my neck, my shoulders, and I couldn't sleep. And I was kind of asking myself, what is this? Please don't be the bread. Like, is this the bread that's doing this? Because here I am, like I've jumped all in and just didn't even really kind of assess things at all, just kind of truly believing like, hey, this is going to be great. But here I am having, extreme redness, even more around my nose and mouth than I'd had before.
Yeah.
And so I started to get very discouraged. And I'm like, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I can't do this. And so during, 2020, when I was kind of doing my gut health journey, I had done a 5-day fast of water only. And during that time, I had to kind of experience what I was experiencing, in this like 3 weeks into bread making. And so I took an Epsom salt bath. I went outside and did some of my workouts just to really sweat. I don't have any aspirin in the house because it expires before we can use it. We just don't have a lot of medicine or anything just because we don't get sick that often. And so I didn't have anything for my joint pain and so I was just like, I'm just going to sweat this out. And so that's what I was doing. And so probably about 3 to 5 days, I was experiencing this. And then probably about day 5 or 6, I woke up and it was and I looked in the mirror, I was brushing my teeth, and it was almost shocking because I had no redness around my nose or mouth. Like it was kind of like overnight, my dermatitis started to heal. And I got so excited, Sue.
I can imagine.
Because I like, this is it. And then I've had this wart, like a planter's wart on my index finger for years. I mean, it's like it needs a name. Like it's been there so long on my body, and it started to flake off. And now it's just kind of like a little scab on my finger, and it was gone. And so it was kind of like this weird thing. And then come to find out, through listening, what was it? Episode 83.
Yes.
About detoxing. And it like gave me goosebumps because as you were talking about some of your other listeners who were experiencing some of the same things that I did, and that was exactly like the red bumps, the joint pain.
Yep.
And so all of that, like just, it really made things click and fall into place that's what I had experienced because, with this bread, I was having, much more healthy bowel movements, let's say.
Right. Yeah. You couldn't diminish some of the good things you were seeing, but these flare-ups just really puzzled me when people would write about that. And so hearing your story is, I hate to say it's encouraging to me, but confirming, because I would say maybe it is a detox. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so when I would hear people say they just persevered and it went away and almost like you just said, it was there. And then almost like overnight gone.
Yes.
Just gone.
Yes.
And wow, I'm so impressed that you persevered. It would have been so easy to blame the bread and just say it must be the bread causing this flare up and these reactions, these negative reactions, especially with all the negative that we hear. What an encouraging testimony to others you are. You're a real trooper. I'm going to say that. And, it just is amazing to me. And so just as you found encouragement from listening to my previous podcast, episode number 83 on detoxing with real bread, I hope and feel sure that your experience is going to encourage others in so many ways. I hope it sheds light on the whole birth control thing. As you were talking about the side effects of that, and I had never heard of that birth control. What was it called?
Post-birth control syndrome. Yes.
You've got my interest up. I'm going to do some research on that. But as you were going through all the side effects and all the things you experienced with that, it sounds like so many things that people blame on bread and gluten. I mean,
yeah.
That's what came to mind. So it's been a year since I did that detox podcast, 83. I think it was out in September of 2023. So I thought today when I was rereading your testimony, I'm like, I may have to do a replay as a follow-up to your story so that others can find that reassurance, that confirmation, and that hope to keep going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was so encouraging. And I think if the bread hadn't tasted as good as it was, I may have given up.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, this is terrible. Why should I keep stuffing this in my face?
Yeah.
But when
Well, but I think that the process of it, like I thought it was going to be much more involved, much more complicated. It really doesn't take any extra time, as far as you're milling your own grain. And I think it kind of seems overwhelming or time consuming, and it really isn't. And so had it been like so labor intensive, and if the bread hadn't tasted so good, I may have given up. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, it was because it tasted so good. And I was just so enjoying, feeding my family, my husband's joy over having bread in the house again. And even my 1-year-old, just loving having the bread himself, and so that was really motivating for me to keep on.
And you're starting him off right at such a young age. So, so how are you doing now? So the dermatitis and all the joint pain, that's all cleared up?
So that's all cleared up. And I would say some of just the other benefits I'm really seeing is I was kind of having some dark circles under my eyes just because I think again, just wasn't keeping up with the nutritional demands of taking care of a new baby and nursing. And so I've noticed that just like my complexion and the dark circles under my eyes even have diminished.
Yeah.
And then also I think my energy levels are so much higher.
Oh, yeah.
Is what is so encouraging for me because I'm a high energy person. And so to feel depleted because I'm not keeping up nutritionally and not even really realizing that, except for having the bread now, I feel has given me that boost and really kind of filling in the gaps that even my supplements and eating right, real food, kind of doing all the right things. But this has just really been kind of a missing piece of the puzzle, adding in that fiber, eliminating the waste. And
those B vitamins that are supplied by the grain.
Yes.
And then the good gut organisms feeding on the fiber to produce even more B vitamins. Wow. It's so noticeable. I know for me, I mean, I had 7 biological children, but that was a big thing for me. I noticed that when I started eating the bread and we started making the bread, I had more energy. And I tell people, when you have that many children, and you only have one, but even when you have one child and you're nursing mother and all these things, you notice when you have more energy.
Yes.
And I wasn't having to drink brewer's yeast or take handfuls and handfuls of vitamin supplements. Just eat my bread and I would poop every day and have more energy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We definitely, we have poop conversations in our home.
Yep.
So it's just been so encouraging how healthy my bowel movements have become. Like, I went from maybe having one bowel movement a day to almost after every meal now. Yeah. And so I think that is just such an improvement in and of itself and it speaks to health, and that has come definitely just from incorporating, milling my own grain. And so that's huge.
Yeah. And I think also people don't realize what a huge tool that is in the detoxification process. We think of detoxing now, yes, Epsom salt bath, sweating, fasting, taking some kind of detox supplement, but just the daily elimination is a detox process in itself, and it's a gentle one.
Yes.
And the bread is key with that, and then more with just the fiber, taking things out that our guts don't want to sit in there. So anyway, that is so exciting. And how about your husband? Has he noticed any health benefits or other than just loving the bread?
So yeah, I've just been raving about it. It's bread out of my mouth all day, every day, lately. And so he was kind of saying about a week or so ago, he's like, you know what? I don't know. He's like, yeah, besides enjoying the bread, like if I'm experiencing those same benefits, but he was eating maybe just a slice in the evenings when he'd get home from work, whereas I was just kind of consuming it after, during every meal, me and baby. And so now he started to bring either the bread or a roll or banana bread to work with him. And so I think in the next couple months, I think we'll start to see some other stories from him.
Yes,
exactly. So
yes, that is just so wonderful. That is just such a great testimony and different. I'm so glad you shared about the birth control pills and that what that led, the depletion of the nutrition in your body. And I just don't think people realize that the B vitamins, and I believe vitamin E, it destroys it stops ovulation.
Yes.
So that's how it works. So when you come off, yes, you're going to have all these symptoms and syndromes and just adverse effects. I didn't realize it would take months to have that. So
yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your life with us today. And I know that this is going to be an inspiration for everyone that hears your story. And I always like to give an opportunity for you to share any final words or anything else that's on your mind and heart that would encourage our listeners.
Yeah, so I think kind of like where the breakthrough continued to come in my life was asking the why, what is the root, and then persevering until you kind of have that peace from God that you've discovered the root of your issues, because I think for years I was just treating the symptoms and exchanging one problem for another or for a host and not really getting to the root. And so I think oftentimes, even the Bereans in scripture, they were, like we are told, be like the Bereans, they studied the scripture, and they were asking why. And so I think we need to ask the why, and do our due diligence and asking the Holy Spirit to lead us to the answer of our issues, so that we don't settle and stop short of what could be our miracle. And then also, I think I think I probably have convinced 3 or 4 of my friends, couple in Missouri, and then around here, get a mill, start milling grain for your family. And if they're hesitant, make them a loaf of bread, because that is ultimately what did it for me, was just having tasted it. And I think that is what motivates me is, making bread for my family and seeing, the joy that it brings into our home. Yes.
I think that is so right on. And I think of 2 things. There's a scripture in Isaiah 65 that God really spoke to me. I know I've shared my wart story so many times. And one time when sharing it, I was talking very, very quickly. And I'm like, after months of going back and forth to the doctor, I'm driving home all distressed. And then I see this sentence on a page in a book said vitamin E has been known to get rid of warts. And I go home and I start giving my children vitamin E and their warts go away. I'm like, I could have been spared this, for months. And I remember one time I was at a homeschool show and I was having to talk very quickly and sharing it very fast. And when I got to that point I said, driving home in the car, and I saw that sentence on the page of the book. And I said, I don't know why God didn't show me that before. I had never said that before when I had shared my wart story. But when I got back to my room, and we were staying at a hotel, and I asked the Lord, I was kind of mad. I was like, why didn't you show me that before? And very quietly, he spoke to my spirit and he said, you never asked. You never asked. And I said, and I say to this day, I can't go back and see that moment in the car when I'm driving home after months of going back and forth to the doctor, now distraught. I just wanted this wart to go away on my daughter. And we had tried, all kinds of stuff. And now they're wanting to put her to sleep and cut it all. I don't know what.
Yeah.
And I just said no. And I was like, I bet you in that moment of distress, I cried out to the Lord for an answer, and he gave it to me.
Wow.
But when he said, you never ask, it made me think of a scripture in Isaiah 65, and it says, all day long, I stand here with my arms open wide to a people that seek me not. And I say, here I am. And I'm just like, oh God, we got to ask why. Sometimes he'll tell us, don't ask me why anymore, but yeah. For the most part, and I hear it over and over, people will say, I was praying for an answer and God led me to the bread. And that is quite a privilege to be a part of that. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. And then there's a scripture in Timothy. I'm not sure. Don't know if I can find it right off the bat while we're talking, but it says in the last days, people will be teaching you, forbidding you to marry. And it said, and abstain from foods that God had intended to be shared. And that is bread. Yeah. Bread's intended to be shared. And I can't tell you how many stories I hear like yours that said, somebody gave me a loaf of bread, and I felt more energy, or moms of young children, severe constipation. Someone gave me a loaf of bread and my child's constipation was done, and it's just amazing. So anyway, it's just such an encouraging story that you shared today. And I just want to thank you for coming on, taking time out of your busy day. And I know that this is going to be an inspiration and an encouragement to everyone who listens to your story today. So thank you again, Leanne, for coming on Sue's Healthy Minutes, and want to thank everyone for listening today. And I want to encourage you again, share your bread, share your story. You never know whose life you might be saving. So until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.